Hello and welcome to today's webinar. The topic is modern data protection, and on this special webinar event, you'll hear about the exciting partnership between Rubrik and NetApp and how they can help you to achieve the ultimate data protection solution for your IT infrastructure. Thank you so much for joining this webinar produced by Actual Tech Media. My name is David Davis of Actual Tech Media, and I'll be serving as the moderator. Before we jump into it, just a few things that you should know about the event. As always here, we want these to be educational. We're all former IT professionals ourselves, and we know how tough it can be out there in the trenches of IT. And you've got a lot of storage and data protection problems. I'm sure of it. And here is a place to get some solutions and some answers to your questions. So we encourage your questions there in the questions panel. And we'll be doing a dedicated Q&A session at the end of the event, but keep those questions coming throughout. We also have a number of resources available there in the handouts tab. We have the cloud data management for NetApp solution brief and the storage grid and Rubrik configuration guide, as well as a link to data storage and data protection, the competitive advantage ebook. So make sure that you check out those resources before you go. And then at the end of the webinar, we'll be doing our Amazon $300 gift card drawing for one lucky attendee on the live event. If you're watching this on demand, of course, the drawing has already occurred. The prize terms and conditions can be found there in the handouts tab. And then I said that we encourage your questions. We started this year, our new best question prize as well for a $50 Amazon gift card. This gift card will be awarded based on questions that are asked. Of course, you still have to meet the prize policy, and we'll contact the winner after the event. So with that out of the way, I'm excited now to bring in our two expert presenters, Mr. Adam Fox, Senior Solutions Architect at Rubrik, and Mr. Jonathan Leafty, Data Protection Solutions Architect at NetApp. Adam and Jonathan, it's exciting to have you both on. Thank you so much for being here. Take it away.
Thanks, David. So why we're here, right? We're going to talk about, why does NetApp and Rubrik together make sense for our customers, right? Why does the two companies have such a close strategic partnership and alignment, both at the executive level and at the engineering level, and also at the field level, I suppose. Why do these two companies work together? And you can kind of see this illustrated on this slide, where our visions, closely match, our independent visions, closely match together with, the NetApp data fabric or our customers' data fabric, allowing, data to be where our customers need it when they need it, right? Whether or not that's on-prem, in their private cloud, public cloud, multi-cloud, doesn't matter. And you see that on the right-hand side that Rubrik shares that vision, right? We want our customers to be able to have their workloads where they need it, right? Have the data where they need it, protect the data where it's at, move it where it needs to be, and have all the goodness of, the visibility over that data and the various copies that may exist within the environment, and leverage those copies strategically, right? And not to just be a copy sitting there just for backup purposes or, risk mitigation purposes, but also to be able to dual purpose that. So it's been a great partnership over the years, though I'm kind of excited to tell you guys about something that's hot off the presses. I'm not sure if anyone else has seen this, but we're getting closer, right? Rubrik continues to integrate within our technology stacks and what we offer. And starting soon, and it was announced that we'll be able to resell Rubrik at NetApp. So it'll be on our price book, and you'll be able to, buy it through NetApp if you so desire. So that's a great announcement that we've been excited for. We've known about for a while behind the scenes, but we've been able to announce it officially. I think it was yesterday morning. So happy to see that. So with that said, let's talk about why we're here. Data protection, right? So I've been in the business for quite a while, at least 10 years. I've been with NetApp for a little over a year now. Prior to that, I was on the partner side and the customer side, both for NetApp and Rubrik. So I have familiarity with both technologies prior to me coming on board at NetApp. So, back in the day, data protection was never let's say sexy, right? You didn't really want to be the backup admin, cycling through tapes and or a disk attached storage and having to move it around to meet your requirements and what your GRC concerns. But solely, we had backup to disk coming out, right? We had VTLs coming out, so you didn't have to have physical tapes anymore. And then we saw enhancements in performance from backup, from a backup perspective with block level incrementals. We started seeing snapshot based backups, or replication, et cetera, to protect your data and increase data availability. And we're starting to see cloud based technologies coming on coming on deck to help mitigate and enhance data protection. And from a Rubrik perspective, when they came on board, they kind of disrupted honestly the entire backup and data protection and data governance industry, right? I remember when they came out of stealth mode, I was like, whoa, wow, like where was this a year ago? I would have loved to use this. And so you see this idea of a global management of your backup, risk mitigation, data governance, all your data copies, and again, getting the goodness of being able to use this for more than just a backup perspective, right? And I'll let my colleague and Adam go into that more. Now, from a NetApp perspective, we've been around for 29 years, right? We continually evolve, we continually enhance functionality that we see customers needing, right? And just because we've released something, I'll get into this a little bit, released something maybe 20 years ago doesn't mean we don't continually evolve that particular technology. And a good example of this is the threats out there are becoming more sophisticated. I'm sure if you haven't personally experienced it, you've heard the stories about ransomware attacks or malicious attacks in general becoming a lot more sophisticated, where they go after backup data, snapshot data, secondary copies, tertiary copies, etc. And kind of what I highlighted here in red is the various ways that we've helped mitigate that risk, right? And some of that came 2 decades ago, right? But we continually evolve that. So, for example, SnapLock technology is our worm technology that we use, and I have quite a bit of customers that leverage SnapLock to have kind of that safeguard, copy of data that if all else fails, that they have this safe. They know that in one of the modes that we offer, that nothing short of physically destroying the disks could ever remove this data. F policy, for example, allows the more sophisticated detection that allows you to remediate much faster if an attack occurs. We'll talk about StorageGrid shortly. That was an acquisition back in 2010, and we continually invest in that and develop further technologies within the StorageGrid product line. And something that came out recently, Cloud Secure is a SaaS offering that we offer to provide insight and into the evolving threats, user behavior analysis, and some proactive actions that can be done when you're running our technologies on tap, et cetera. And there's a lot on there, so I'm not going to go through every single item there. Otherwise, we'll be here for the next 4 hours. So StorageGrid is something like that I do want to talk about. Adam will cover some of the the protection. You'll see where NetApp technologies, whether or not it's ONTAP, HCI, or et cetera, is your primary storage, and Rubrik is helping to protect that workload, the workloads that are running on that. StorageGrid is another technology that we have. It is object storage that can be used in multiple ways. It's best if it is used in multiple ways because it is a scale out, globally accessible, redundant, multi-site technology. But it can be leveraged from a Rubrik perspective as a backup target, right? Again, it's globally addressable, so you don't have to, point your Rubrik environment to multiple endpoints. If one site, goes down, it will automatically know where it lives in another site, if you do have a multi-site configuration. But the greatness about storage grid is that everything's policy driven, right? And it can do it at a granular level, at an object level. So conceptually, right, you have everything contained within a bucket level. So for example, you can have a Sydney bucket for Rubrik backup data, and you can define it at a bucket level, to define the data protection related to that bucket, where it should live, where it should be accessible, even the nodes that it should live on, right? Maybe you have um, more cost effective nodes within your storage grid that you want this backup data to actually sit on. And you can define this all at the bucket level or at the object level to meet your needs. So you may have certain regulatory requirements, maybe GPDR, maybe CCPA, that says, hey, or maybe just your industry specific regulations that says, I have a concern about data gravity. Where should this data live, right? I'm backing it up. Maybe I'm backing it up from Sydney, but really I want it also contained somewhere else, right? You can define all that. And that's, and Rubrik, it can always access this data no matter where it lives. And again, why we're better together is just really from a NetApp perspective. We've been doing this for years now. Is that we really want our customers to be able to leverage our technology wherever they need it to be, right? Never, whether or not it's core, or edge or core or cloud, we want our customers to be able to leverage it. So we have technologies that live in hyperscalers. I have customers that are completely cloud based and leveraging CVO. I have one customer that's in Azure and they have no on premises. NetApp technologies. It's completely native to Microsoft Azure, and that's great, right? And Rubrik can also protect those workloads, and so that's really our goal, right? We want to make sure we can meet our customers where they're at and provide solutions. With that said, I'm going to turn it over to Adam, who's going to go a little bit deeper into Rubrik.
Great, thanks, Jonathan. So yeah, I want to talk a little bit about the Rubrik side and what we tried to do when we built Rubrik and how I think that helps integrate in a NetApp environment. And so what we tried to design is really a software stack to simplify the whole backup and recovery process, right? And so we do things like we get rid of the idea of managing jobs, for example, and we do everything by policy. And you see the little sliders on here on the center. And in some cases, that's literally as easy as it is. You slide something over for how long you want to keep something, things like that. So keeping it very simple. We do have broad application support. Most of your major applications out there, hosts, platforms, database types, virtualization engines. We have support for all of those things, all of which could be living on a NetApp, whether that's on the block side in terms of applications or whether that's on the NAS side for unstructured data, which is actually where I spend most of my time. I actually came from NetApp several years ago and spent about 10 years there. So pretty familiar with that environment. And then once we protect that stuff, right, we want to be able to give you the choice of where you want to keep it and where it makes sense for the business. We don't want to tie you into things. So it's possible that it makes sense to have a copy locally on the Rubrik for easy recovery, but it may also make sense to use some sort of hybrid cloud option, whether that be the public cloud buckets, the three major ones come to mind, AWS, Google, and Azure, or whether your idea of cloud also involves a local storage grid, as Jonathan spoke to earlier, right? So that is fully supported and you can mix and match them, again, as you need on a application or data set basis to be able to decide what makes sense for you as far as protection as well as recovery, right? And to do this in a very simple interface, so you're not managing hundreds of jobs and all these crazy things like that, which has been more of the traditional way of doing things. And it's something that we really focused when we founded Rubrik to kind of bring the kind of automation that we've brought to so many other things in the industry, right? Just in IT in general, whether that's hyperconvergence or all the various automation tools. We really didn't find that data protection had that, and that was really kind of the drive behind Rubrik. So For NAS specifically, right? Because this is kind of my area, and it's important to a lot of NetApp customers, as that's where NetApp really got their start, was in the NAS space. We went back to think about, okay, if we were going to do this today, right? And this was several years ago. How would we approach it? And the traditional way of doing that was to use NDMP, right? Because that was basically a agent that lived on the NAS array that could work with everybody's stuff. And that was really the point behind it, right? So we decided, though, that in the modern world, perhaps that's not the best approach. And for various reasons, right? I mean, it's tougher to do things like incremental forever, right? It's hard to do that, right? It's possible. Some folks have put some layers on top of it, which of course adds more complexity, but it doesn't really help. And then things like, we don't want you to be format bound. We want you to be able to back up whatever you want and not worrying about whether there's an agent there or anything like that. And also really think about things like scale out. NetApp has made a lot of moves to make their array scale out. Rubrik was scale out from day one, just because we're newer. And so NDMP was really built around, a lot of the solutions have manually configured streams and stuff like that. Could all of that be automated using the NAS protocols to be able to just sort of make that automatically scale up and scale down for you? Again, trying to bring simplification to this space, right? That's really kind of the overall design goal for NAS specifically that we tried to bring to the other things where we got started with things like VMs and databases. And so I think we've done a pretty reasonable job at that to try to make it easier. But so here's the thing, we can move data to, hybrid cloud. We can provide backup and protection. But if you really want to think about, okay, what other value can backups bring? Backup, Jonathan said, has always kind of been a boring area, right? It hasn't really been or perhaps David said that. How can we make this interesting? How can we make this bring more value to the business? And so we also see backups as kind of a last line of defense for things like ransomware, right? Because let's face it, we see all the data, right? So that's an advantage. We can notice things like, your daily change rate on this data has been, 1 to 2% a day. Last night it was 15%. You may want to take a look at that. And we can also do things like look at patterns. Okay, so how did that data change, right? Because again, we're backing up the data. We can say, okay, you know what? Not only did 15% of your data change, but the pattern of change looks a lot like encryption. And so, yeah, I mean, maybe you did something where that wasn't a problem, but what if it is, right? And so once okay, now we realize we've been hit, how do you get back, right? And how do you get back quickly and back to the latest point in time? Well, that's something that a backup software should be able to do. And so we have a product called Radar that does that. And so it kind of gives you that ability to say, hey, you know what? Something has massively changed here, and if you need to roll back, this is where you do it. We can get you back in a couple of clicks and get that thing going, because Radar can talk to the Rubrik software via APIs and actually orchestrate your recovery for you, right? And taking advantage of the fact that Rubrik by design is immutable. So we have an append-only file system. So once you write something to it, you can't change it, right? And so because a lot of these ransomware folks are trying to attack backups as well, and if you're just mounting up a disk-based backup, you better be careful, right? Because we've seen cases where they've attacked that as well, right? So again, let's try to bring more business value to your data protection. Another place we do that is now governance, right? Think of all the data you have, right? This could be petabytes of data, and perhaps some of that stuff falls under regulation, right? Maybe it's, personal information, credit card numbers, maybe it's health information, stuff like that. it's it's easy for that data to move around when it shouldn't, and that's not good things for auditors. So again, while we're not doing this live on your active data, as an extra line of defense, as we back up the data, well, what if we had some intelligence to look for stuff like that, right? To look for known things that your industry is regulated on, and we have some pre-canned stuff for that. Or you could do some custom stuff to say, hey, look for these patterns. And you tell us where that data is supposed to be, and then if we find those kind of patterns elsewhere, we can try to raise a flag and say, hey, could you check out this particular data set? It looks like there's some credit card stuff or social security numbers or something like that is in an area where it's not supposed to be. And it could be totally accidental. I mean, that it's not necessarily that anything is malicious going on here, but if it gives you that extra assurance that you're following what you need to for compliance, we think that's important. So again, these are optional things that you can add on, but we think it brings some value to just more than just backing up, right? So if we can add on these services to it and really allow your data protection architecture to bring some other value to the business, and we think that's important. So, and you can see here we have different types of reports. It's all nice stuff in the cloud. Now, something we did specifically. Oh, I'm sorry. Did you?
Hey, Adam. Sorry to interrupt.
Yeah.
There's a lot of great questions coming in. I wanted to ask you this one. It comes from James, who said, "What happens if the site with Rubrik goes away and my data's in the cloud still?"
Oh, perfect. So, the data we write to the cloud is actually self-describing, right? So we always have the metadata so we can find things on the appliance itself, but it also lives with the data. So you don't have to separately back up your indices, right, to be able to find it. So worst case, the primary site with the Rubrik is a smoking hole, right? And you wrote your data out to some cloud vendor. We can bring in a brand new appliance to another site probably at that point. As long as we have the encryption keys and access to the bucket, we can attach to that bucket and basically recreate what we need to get that data running again, because we can't just have it in one place. We have to have that, because we're the last line of defense, we have to be able to be resilient enough to be able to pull that out. So
Smart.
That helps.
Good architecture. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, thanks. Thank you. So one of the things that we do for NAS specifically, and partially because NAS tends to be big, right? The problem with NAS is that, not a lot of people, there are some, but not a lot of people have a petabyte of VMware virtual machines. A lot of people have a petabyte of NAS. It's actually kind of normal. So you may not want to land a petabyte of NAS data onto the Rubrik, right? Because most of the things we would write to the local appliance, and then you may decide to push things out to the cloud, whether that's public or private, as they get older. With NAS, we have a very specific feature that we call direct archive. And the idea there is that this data is big. We don't want to land it on Rubrik because we don't want to buy 2 racks full of Rubrik disks just to be able to hold this NAS data. But what if we brought it in, processed it, reduced it, encrypted it, and then instead of writing it out locally, we write it directly out to the archive of your choice. That could be storage grid, that could be public cloud, wherever it makes sense for that data set. And you can mix and match them. So then what gets left behind is kind of what I alluded to before, is simply a copy of the metadata indices, right? So that way you can do searches locally, right? You don't have to go out to the cloud to actually find stuff before you want to recover it. But then when you're ready to recover it, we would then pull it back from whatever source. What that does is it means that we can get away with at most 10% of the space that you would be backing up on the Rubrik. It can be even lower than that depending on where you're putting the data. It has to do with how things are processed, but no more than 10%. So if you If you had a petabyte of data, of NAS data to protect, we wouldn't need more than 100 terabytes of Rubrik, possibly less. So that's a huge savings as far as the amount of hardware you'd have to buy to make that work, right? So that's really kind of an important thing there, right? So we bring the simplicity of policies and all that good stuff, but give you the choice, data set per data set. You could decide some stuff lands on Rubrik, some stuff goes directly to the cloud. That's okay, right? We don't lock you into one or the other. You decide based on the business rules of how you want to do that. And I think we've been selling this for a couple of years now. I think we're probably at about 2.5 years. We've got probably at least 1,000 customers running it. It makes a lot of sense for these larger NAS estates. So hopefully that's something we can do specifically for NAS, where we don't, because I've seen some folks who do this in the space where you still have to land the whole thing and then they'll push it out instantly and delete it. We're not doing that here. We are literally passing it through as we process. So that's, I think, a differentiator for some of the offerings that I've heard that are like this out there. And then from an orchestration of data services, David, another question. Cool.
Well, sorry, Adam. One more question here. There's a lot of good questions coming in. This one, they're asking, what version of Snapdiff is supported?
That's right where I'm getting to here. So that's perfect. Good timing on that. So we do support Snapdiff, right? And that is part of being integrated with NetApp and part of being a partner of NetApp is we get access to the private Snapdiff APIs. Some backup folks have it, some don't. It literally depends on your relationship with NetApp. And so today, and let me just step back for a little bit. What does Snapdiff do, right? What Snapdiff does today is it allows us for incremental backups to avoid a tree walk. Because when you have lots and lots of files, right, that tends to be the longest part, especially if you're doing an incremental, right? And this is for NAS data. For applications, we do different things. But for NAS data, what if, let's say I have 200 million files in this NetApp volume, right? It's really dense. The files are small. They're a few K each, right? I don't want to have to walk that tree every time just to protect the change. What I can do is I can look at 2 point-in-time array snapshots on the NetApp, and then be able to say, you know what, NetApp, you tell me what's changed between those two, and they don't have to walk the tree. They can do some work in the background with their snapshot block maps and stuff to do this quicker. And we're also not throwing all of those metadata ops at the array. And so it's a savings on that end too. And then it returns a list to us, which we can then use to do the incremental backup. That's Snapdiff version 1 and 2. We support those today. We have for well over a year. NetApp just recently released Snapdiff version 3, which is a little bit different. And it is based on customers who want to do things like Snap Mirror to cloud, right? And want to use NetApp to be able to move that data. And what that allows us to do is you can take advantage of the efficiencies of using NetApp to move the data because, again, they have block level access to Waffle, which can make things a lot more efficient. But the one thing that was missing in all of that, really two things. One is a index of where things are, so we can try to find the latest copies of things and things like that. And two, orchestration, right? There wasn't a really good orchestration layer to be able to kind of help you do those recoveries and stuff from that. And that's where Snapdiff version 3 is coming in. It was just released this year. And the idea there is we can orchestrate through APIs the replication and recovery, the Snap Vaults, if you will, or the Snap Mirror to cloud, which will be the first release of it. We can help orchestrate that stuff. But when the transfer's done by NetApp then sends us the index information, right? And so that way we can then catalog it and make it searchable for you. That is not in the product today, but will be later. And I'll just leave it at that for now. So we are actively going to support that. We've committed to it. But today you can use 1 and 2 without concern. It just works. There's no additional cost to you from us or NetApp. It's just there to make things easier. So hopefully that helps. So that's really kind of what this whole slide here was also about, was in it. So we're kind of attacking the NAS problem on two levels. We're attacking the scale, petabytes and stuff, with things like direct archive, so that you can put it someplace where it makes sense cost-wise. And we're attacking what I call the density, which is those hundreds of millions or sometimes billions of files. That how do you walk through that and still be able to maintain SLAs properly? And that's really, so we're kind of taking it kind of with a 1-2 punch, but part of this leverages our partnership with NetApp to be able to do the Snapdiff side, which I think will really benefit folks who are NetApp customers, right? And we want to make things as easy as possible for those folks. So it is really around the orchestration layer and trying to get the stuff out there. When we do get version 3 support, that'll be even more of an orchestration, right? Because we'll actually be able to help drive those recoveries and things by using APIs that app provides for us to be able to then integrate those things together. Rubrik, being a now 7-year-old company, we are very API friendly, right? So we publish all of our APIs out there. So if you have specific things you want to do of your own orchestration, and you're a fan of PowerShell or Chef or Puppet or Python, that's mine. I'm more of a Python guy, but you can then write that stuff, talk to NetApp, talk to Rubrik, because a lot of NetApp's APIs are public. In fact, there's recently, I think in 9.6, they released a more RESTful version, so it's even easier to use. That's the way ours work. And I've written stuff. I've written quite a few things. I actually have about 45 repos up on GitHub of mostly this kind of stuff, of just integrating things like NetApp and Rubrik together using APIs. And we keep it wide open. We try to help customers who are trying to do it on their own. And we've done some of our own integration with things like ServiceNow and stuff like that to make recoveries easier. So orchestrating is really important. Automation is really kind of the purpose of a lot of this stuff, because as these environments are growing, the only sane way to get your arms around it is to automate, right? So because we just can't keep up with, as easy as a couple of mouse clicks can be at scale. I want things to just automatically work, and then tell me when it doesn't work, right? And that's a way to to be able to sleep better at night and to have more time to do things. And I think that's important. But yeah, from a Snapdiff point of view, there's certainly something that we've worked to bring to market, and will continue to do so as that technology evolves. So this is kind of more of a summary, right? So what does this partnership bring together, right? And it's really trying to provide things end to end, right? So on the front end, NetApp brings all of their goodness. I know Jonathan talked about things like F policy and all of the various Snap technologies and all that good stuff, which can help you, which clearly help you maintain these large data sets that we have today, and also integrate with cloud, whether that be public or whether that be something like StorageGrid. Rubrik comes in as well and says, yeah, you know what, from a data protection and a data governance point of view, right? Because we are doing things, like radar and sonar, like I described. Let's protect the data, but let's also bring in some extra things to kind of help out for things like ransomware detection and things like that, while we are allowing you to recover quickly. In some cases, we can actually instantly recover things like databases and VMs. So when you do get hit, so if something does happen, heaven forbid, a ransomware attack, you can at a minimum get your critical stuff online as soon as possible, and perhaps the less priority stuff you can take your time to get back. And we've had customers who have had to do that, and it's been good to help them out. It's really been rewarding when this really unfortunate thing happens, and something as simple as a backup product that works well really makes a difference and keeps critical things going. It's one of the reasons why I was willing to come to a place like Rubrik, because it wasn't just taking bits and from one place and putting it in another. It's doing more with it and thinking about things in a larger context. And that's what I think makes us a interesting place to be. And now I get the bonus of working with my old buddies back at NetApp now too, which has been fun because I was there for 10 years, had a great time there. So that's really it from our end, right? Hopefully you can kind of see, obviously, the value of NetApp. These guys have been around for decades, and what Rubrik can bring to the table to be able to try to help manage all this stuff, and that together we can hopefully make the lives of data admins, whether that be the front end storage or whether that be the protection folks, or maybe they're the same people in some organizations. Try to make those lives easier and hopefully bring better stuff to the business, because that's really what this is all about. And obviously this is a high level summary, but absolutely, if for very specific things, if you definitely want to know more, by all means reach out to either team. So if whichever team better, one of the things I found, and I know everyone I've talked to on the NetApp side has found this as well, the teams are very well aligned out there in the field. So if you talk to one and you want us to come in together and work on something, it's very easy to do. So if you're more NetApp focused and you work with those guys, they can bring in the Rubrik folks. If you have a real good relationship with the Rubrik team but want to investigate more on the NetApp side, absolutely, we're more than happy to help bring those folks in and work together to solve your problems. So that's what I have. Thanks, David.
Great presentation, Adam and Jonathan. Really appreciate that. Let's go to our Q&A session. I can tell a lot of folks are excited about this by just the volume of questions that have come in. So thank you, everyone, for those questions. While we take your questions, I'm just going to bring up this poll for everyone out there in the audience. I want to call your attention to it. Says, what additional information would you like about the Rubrik and NetApp partnership? And this is a multi-select question, so feel free to select more than one answer there. So let's see. First question that came in, and I'm not sure exactly which one of you these are for in some cases, so feel free just to jump in. Luna is asking about if the NetApp storage grid will work in a hybrid environment without any special requirements or changes.
Yeah, I can take that. So one thing I probably glossed over a little bit is how you consume storage grid, or how the different ways it can be deployed, right? So storage grid comes in both an appliance model, a pure software defined model where you can put it on a VM, or bare metal if you want to spin up your own bare metal server and also deploy storage grid software. But that's really the advantage of storage grid. It is a true software defined technology. The underlying hardware is just really what's your preference on how to deploy it. Right? So in a hybrid environment, absolutely, you can deploy it where you need it. That's even if you want to deploy anything, like if you're using public cloud, if you want to deploy instance there, as long as you have connectivity. The idea with object storage in general is it's a globally addressable, storage technology. So as long as you have some type of connectivity to that endpoint, you can still get to it. So if you're living in a hyperscaler, AWS, Azure, GCP, and you have network connectivity to that endpoint, and assuming that connectivity is sufficient, you can still access that storage grid endpoint. Hopefully
Very cool.
Sense.
Yeah, absolutely. And then there's another question here about storage grid. They say, is it true that NetApp recommends disabling encryption and compression on storage grid?
That's the first time I ever heard that. Adam, I don't know if you ever heard that. Maybe it's a perspective of disabling.
I have not. I mean, we would be doing it right in the context of Rubrik. You might do that only because it would be a waste of cycles, because we're doing the same thing. And typically, when you compress and encrypt, and then you put it on something else that then tries to compress and encrypt, you don't really get much benefit, but you're spending cycles. So from that end, if you're already writing stuff that's doing that, I could see that making sense. I can't speak to the other stuff because that would be more, a more generic NetApp thing, and I've been gone for a while. But certainly, if you're doing from Rubrik, I would say it's optional, just because that already happens on our end, so it's kind of pre-done for you. You could. I just don't know how much benefit you'd have if you did, just because our particular application does that anyway. But I could certainly see other object stuff where it wouldn't, and it absolutely would make sense.
Yeah,
Okay.
and from our perspective, I've never, like I said, I never heard of why you would do that from a storage grid perspective. Whether or not you're using Fabric Pool, whether or not you're using Rubrik, whether or not you're using it for some other use case. Um, I've never seen that recommendation, so I would say no, it is not true. So.
Okay, good advice. Thank you. Next question: How could we benefit from Rubrik NAS Direct Archive to back up a large number of files on a NetApp FAS storage? What's the benefit?
Exactly.
Around that?
That right. So the benefit there is one, it's really twofold, right? Because when we say large, right, like I said, it's kind of on two axes, right? There's size and then there's density, right? And we try to address both of them. And for just the large number of files, right? I've got 500 million 8K files or something crazy like that. That's really where Snapdiff is the main benefit. You may or may not decide to use Direct Archive for that, because a lot of times those files tend to not be the total space is not that big. So maybe it makes sense to go to an archive. Maybe it makes sense to land on Rubrik. If it is big, if it's big and dense, okay, you could use both. But there's nothing precluding you from using one, the other, or both. They're really just options, right? We allow you to turn on Snapdiff per share if you want. We usually have it on by default, but you can turn it off if you wanted to. You could also Direct Archive individually if you want, or you can turn that off and write to the Rubrik if you want to. Again, it's really up to you. And these things are all like one button things. So this is not a massive configuration. I literally click a switch and say, yeah, for this one, I mean, a Direct Archive is literally a checkbox. Do I want to use it or not? And that's it, right? So this is not some massive configuration thing that you have to think of. It's relatively straightforward. Hopefully that helps.
I like that because it also,
Yeah.
if we had a theme, right, it just be like our technologies are simple and flexible, right? It's really, again, meeting you where you need to be, like using it where you need to be. Maybe you have a huge storage grid investment and you have massive amounts of data. It's like, why not use Direct Archive? There's no real downside to it, right?
Right.
It just, again,
yeah,
you deciding how you want and where you want your data, right?
Absolutely.
I love that.
Absolutely.
Simple and flexible. Yeah, we need more simple and flexible solutions out there in the world of IT. We don't need a team of 10 consultants to come in and have to implement something. I love the checkbox simplicity. That's awesome. So let's see. Next question: could storage grid be deployed on a hardware appliance or software only, bare metal server, or a hypervisor? What are the deployment options?
And I think I touched on that a little bit, but yes, all of the above, and a little bit more too. I mean, there's other things you can do with like, cloud tiering and cloud mirroring and et cetera. But yes, all those are acceptable things. Obviously the hardware appliance is probably the easiest to procure and deploy, right? Simple, right? Just like Rubrik, very simple.
Right.
But yeah, it's all the above.
And we do the same thing. I do say that Rubrik is software. The most common thing is the appliance. We call them bricks. It's basically 4 nodes and a little 2U chassis, right? But we absolutely do qualify on all the major server vendors. So if you have the right model, you can deploy it. So if you get a real good server deal from vendor whoever, we can certainly work with that. And it can be deployed natively in the cloud if you want. I mean, it's even to that point where we have what we call cloud clusters. And for so say for example, you were doing NetApp CVO, right, in AW, so you were actually deploying NetApp in the cloud. You could use Rubrik to protect that if you wanted to in the cloud and not have a piece of hardware on your site. So just another way to think about it.
Yeah, that's awesome. A lot of different options there, a lot of flexibility. I like this question from Paul. I bet we've all heard this before. He says that NAS backup and recovery is often pretty slow. What can this solution do to help improve the speed of backup and recovery?
Right, and that's exactly what we tried to address, right? Because that was the real problem with legacy NAS backup, and it's a reason why, honestly, I run into a lot of situations where the solution right now is we're not backing it up. yeah, we're taking snapshots, but we're kind of holding our breath, right? We know because snapshots are awesome, love them, but they're like, I just can't get my hands around this, right? I can't do it in a reasonable amount of time. So from the scan side, Snapdiff helps that, right? Because we're not scanning, we're allowing NetApp to do its magic to do it. And then, like I said, when we are scale out along with NetApp. So again, if you have a lot of data to back up, especially on those first fulls, right? If you're backing up lots of terabytes, we automatically scale up the number of nodes that we're using to pull that stuff in parallel. And again, back to the theme of simplicity, you don't have to configure that. We do it based on how much data we have to move, and we automatically open up those streams, as they called them. But now they're really just different nodes mounting the share, and that kind of gives the old backup stream that we used to talk about with NDMP, right? So that's really where we're trying to do things. And I have had situations where, using things like Snapdiff and just the Rubrik technology, where they've actually been able to get backups daily when they couldn't before, right? Because they just couldn't walk the tree. So the ability to do that and to bring that tech to the table is actually enabling this ability to actually mitigate that risk. So
I'd like to make one comment on that too. Is obviously if you're a NetApp customer, our snapshot technology, you're probably fairly familiar with, even replication technology, but you're probably snapping your data locally, right, for a lot of reasons, especially unstructured data. Hey, I want our end users to be able to recover data from previous versions or the snapshot folder or whatever that may be. But what I love about it is, if you're using one of the Rubrik services that allow you to say, hey, well, something's going on here, you might want to recover to this point in time. Right? That's going to allow you as a NetApp customer to say, okay, well, I have a snapshot copy that matches up. Why not just restore from that point? I mean, it's going to be a lot faster, right? So you have those options, right? Again, that flexibility of like, which way is faster, which way is better. But Rubrik allowing you to have that visibility into your environment, right? Especially for the ever-changing and more sophisticated threats.
Right. And that's where our upcoming V3 Snapdiff, I think, is going to also come into play, because one of the ways to get that stuff to go faster is to be block-based. And to be block-based, you've got to be NetApp, because it's their file system, right? They're not going to give away that. I wouldn't expect them to. So, but they can take advantage of block-based incremental replication. But again, what's the one thing that you're missing on that? Indexing, searching, that kind of stuff, right? It's great to have all those point in times, but how do I find it? So with them moving the data really efficiently, but still providing us the index information, we can take advantage of what we do best in that stuff as well. And again, putting the two together, I think, would be a really compelling solution. So looking forward to that later in the year, to actually be able to take advantage of that stuff.
And I love it that you mentioned that again, because I think it's, until you see it, maybe you won't believe it, kind of thing. But it isn't easy to find a file within just your NetApp native administration tools, right? It's like, oh well, and which version of the file do you want restored to, right? But with Rubrik, oh my goodness, you just Google it, right? They have a little search bar.
It's really a Google-like search. Yeah, we actually hired a few engineers from Google to help. Yeah, it definitely helps. But yeah, if you know exactly what point in time you want, snapshots work great. Yeah. If you know exactly what point in time you want, snapshots are easy, and I used them for years. But if it's I lost this sometime in the last 6 months, I'm not sure when, but I really want the latest copy. That problem, right? That's where having that index really comes into play, and being able to find that and saying, oh, the latest copy was here, go. That's what we're trying to bring to the table.
And I know I've been there. Like, they have no idea where it is, right?
Oh yeah,
it's like, okay,
absolutely.
well. Yeah.
And when you have billions of files in all these versions, it's hard.
Absolutely. Yeah, this sounds like this could help so many IT pros out there with their storage challenges. This question here from Ramesh is interesting. He's asking, what are the top 2 advantages that you see from this partnership or integration between NetApp and Rubrik?
That's a hard one.
I think
just only can pick 2.
I don't know. Yeah. Well, true. Yeah. Pick 2, but from my end, there's a couple things, right? I mean, one of the things is that being able to work with a team that again works together well in the field. As you said, we just announced You're going to be able to buy Rubrik on NetApp paper, so you can use the same partners, all that good stuff. But also the fact that one of the reasons why this partnership happened so quickly, and I've been in the industry for 30 years now, so I've seen these things come and go. One of the reasons why I think it came together so quickly is because there really is no overlap of, products, right? We have no desire to be in the storage business at all. And you can't say that for a lot of data protection companies out there. A lot of them have storage divisions now, right? And so one of the reasons is, so that allows us to be able to really complement each other. And we're not worried about, okay, this person's going to hold back because, we might need to get a sale on this, right? That's not a problem. Anything you buy on the NetApp side doesn't hurt Rubrik's side. It really doesn't, right? And I think it's vice versa, right? So it makes it really easy. And now the fact that, again, you can buy on one thing, everyone, it's really the smoothness of that. That's not even really a technical problem, although we do have good, we have solid technical alignment. It's the day-to-day interaction of trying to get this stuff that, you shouldn't have that kind of friction that I've seen with other folks, right? I mean, that's really kind of the key that I hope makes not just the techies' lives easier, but people up the line as well. That's a shot.
Excellent. And there's a couple questions here around personally identifiable information and GDPR. What can these solutions do to help companies with their compliance and security challenges?
Yeah, so I mean, from that perspective, it really is that kind of that visibility and the auditing capabilities that you have, right? Especially if it's production data that you always need to be concerned about, whether or not you have retention requirements, or like I mentioned, like worm requirements that you can leverage SnapLock for, and to make sure this data is retained, and to know where it went, right? So definitely from a NetApp perspective, we have a bunch of tools that you can leverage to address PII and regulated data. We also have some visibility tools into it, and management tools and governance tools and compliance tools that you can layer on and get more visibility on that. But that's also like what Adam's saying is that's where we leverage Rubrik that has complementary technologies to ours to give you that control, right, and that visibility.
Right, because we look at it as after the fact almost, right? So you have folks that are in the proactive detection space. We're, again, being in the data management space, we're kind of looking at it, okay, we back this data up. That gives us some very unique visibility. And so we're able to apply that, right? And so we have, with the Sonar product, which is what I referred to earlier as far as the governance model, we have some templates that come with it. So it's built for things like PII, GDPR, HIPAA, that kind of stuff. And then you have the ability to define your own kind of filters as well if you have something very specific to your industry. But we try to cover the more common ones, and those are getting added. But again, those are all done there. That's all controlled from a cloud portal, so it's almost like a SaaS type level service. Again, to kind of keep that simplicity part going, because that can talk to your software on site and be able to then leverage the APIs for that to be able to kind of give you the one big view screen across all your sites, right? Because we can't assume that all your data is in one place. So to have that one SaaS portal that sees everything, you can kind of look at it from a more holistic point of view.
Excellent. And then I like this question. They're asking if you can give us any examples of real customers who have used this solution to recover from a ransomware infection.
Sure, I can definitely do that. One that has been very public from our case, thankfully, because they've been very public. So a lot of times you can't name people, which kind of sucks sometimes, but this is a real one. And it happens to be in my backyard. I'm actually based in North Carolina, and it's the city of Durham, North Carolina, right? It's where, at Duke University is, it's that kind of thing. They were hit with ransomware, and like everything was down. They had to send everybody home. And one of the things that they said that made this possible was, one, the fact that they knew their backups were immutable, so it couldn't attack them, right? That was critical, because a lot of these bad guys out there, they're not only looking for your data, they're looking for your backups too, because better chance you'll pay, right? And then two, the ability to get their critical infrastructure up quickly, right? Through things like instant recovery, we have a live mount feature to get critical machines and critical database applications up as soon as possible, while you're then pushing things back to your primary storage after you've cleaned it. We don't ever want to be the long-term piece of that, but we are willing to leverage our disks to kind of get you going for a while say you are storage vMotioning things back to your all-flash FAS or something like that, right? We want to do that just to get you up and going quickly. They were able to get their critical services, like 911, kind of an important thing. They got that up and going within a day, and then we're able to stage back. And the really cool thing about it kind of goes back to simplicity. As soon as we heard, we went in, we sent our folks in, the account team, we had special showing up, and they're like, "Thanks for bringing the donuts, but we got this. We understand how the software works, and we're doing it." And that, to me, more than anything else, to me, that was the nice part, was that we were ready to throw all the resources of the company we had added to get these guys back. And they're like, "No, we're good. You got, we know how the software works, and we're recovering." That, to me, that's the cool part of the story. And also the fact that we can use their name. But anyway, hopefully that's an idea of a real ransomware attack with a decent sized city in the US that has critical infrastructure services, right? That's classic. Thanks.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's a great story. I love to hear that. So I know we're starting to run out of time here in our 1 hour webinar block. Final question I just wanted to ask you all is, if folks are interested in this solution, this partnership, what do you recommend? What should people do to get started?
I think the best way is to reach out to your local account team, like Adam mentioned, right? Either side, right? Yeah. Whoever you're more closer to, just reach out to them, and they can pull in the resources. Often it's pulling in me, or a colleague of mine in our team to talk about it more. And then obviously I work with Adam and his various colleagues, right, to also bring in the whole team, the Rubrik and the NetApp team, together to answer questions and solve problems and create solutions, right? But there is also, if you like doing it on your own, you can certainly Google. We have technical reports on the NetApp side. I know Rubrik has collateral too that you can see, further information about, especially from a technical perspective, how the partnership works and how we integrate with each other. And yeah.
Awesome.
Absolutely.
All right.
Totally concur.
Excellent. Well, I'm afraid that's all the time we have here in our webinar event today. I learned a lot about this exciting new partnership between you all and the exciting new features that you guys have been releasing together. So thank you so much for sharing that. I want to remind everyone out there in the audience to check out the poll question there on the screen before you go. We appreciate your feedback on that. And don't forget to review those resources. Download the handouts in the handouts tab on the cloud data management for NetApp solution brief, storage grid and Rubrik configuration guide, and the data storage and data protection competitive advantage ebook. Those resources are there in the handouts tab. Thank you everyone for all the excellent questions. We didn't have time for all of them, so we really appreciate those. A lot of excitement and interest in this solution. Again, Adam and Jonathan, thanks so much for being here.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
And everyone. Thanks out to everyone out there in the audience. We appreciate it. Have a great day, and we'll see you next time. Bye-bye.